Welcome to
That's
My
talking.
Tonight's story is a channel exclusive by the wonderful mind of Brandy Gray. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And of course, don't forget to hashtag Team Fear. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled An Alpha's Responsibility. Let's get straight into that. Daniel Greene had taken the same route home nearly every day for the past 8 years. It took him through some of the densest forests in the area. It was only a 10-minute drive though, which was better than a highway which would take nearly an hour. The most eventful thing that had ever happened was when he ran into a fallen log after a storm. There were no streetlights, but for some reason animals had never really been a problem, and in 8 years he'd seen probably a total of 3 deer. He was just looking up from switching off the radio and the CD player on. It always stopped working a few miles in, and that's when it happened. He looked up to see a large lumbering shape run in front of his car. It wasn't a deer, it was too big. There were no bears in the area, and he swerved to miss it and regretted it immediately. His car started down a tree-laden slope. He tried to hit the brakes, but it did no good. The hill was muddy from a recent icy rain, and everything went black when the car struck a tree. "He's coming too, Mike." The voice was raspy, and he blinked to open his eyes. There was a woman's old wrinkly face leaning over him. To say the woman looked 100 would be an insult to all 100-year-olds. She looked like tree bark with a face. "I see that, Nana. Now back off before you scare him." He turned his head, and his neck hurt, his head hurt, and he was pretty sure his collarbone was broken. "Try not to move too much," the man said as he came into view. "I'm Mikkel Reinson, and this is my grandmother, Nana Helene." "What happened?" The two exchanged a glance. "We were hoping you could tell us," and Daniel racked his brain. "I was driving home. There was an animal." He froze. "What was that thing?" He continued. "I swerved so I wouldn't hit it, and then went down the bank. That's all I remember." The two again glanced at each other, and it hit him. "Why didn't you call me an ambulance?" He was starting to feel that something wasn't right with these people. The old woman offered him a smile with no teeth and lumbered towards a window, opening the curtains. "I'm afraid self-service out here isn't very good, and this blizzard started right as we found you, so we couldn't go for help." He looked out the window to see endless white. "My brother and I set your shoulder, and I don't think there's anything wrong with your neck or head, aside from a little whiplash, maybe." Everything they said made sense, still, something didn't seem right. It was silent for a while before there was a small timid knock at the door. It opened to a small timid woman, and she was stick-thin and could be no taller than 5 feet. She whispered to the old woman and then scampered away. "Supper's done, if you'd like to come join us," she said, and he nodded. Mikkel came over to help him stand. "By the way, we never got your name." He had just been wondering why they hadn't asked, and then he noticed his clothes had been changed. "Oh, that? Well, you were covered in snow and blood by the time we got you back here. We didn't want you to catch the cold, so we lent you some of my late father's clothing. It was a good fit." He nodded. "Thank you. I'm Daniel, by the way. Daniel Greene." "It's a pleasure," Mikkel said as he led him into a hall. He was in a cabin. It wasn't very big, and the wood was dark, very dark. The hallway they were in was lit with candles, and he realized it had been a kerosene lamp that had lit the bedroom. When they reached the end of the hallway, they appeared to be in a dining room. There was a fairly large table that honestly was much too big for the space, and the room was lit by a roaring fire in the fireplace in the corner. 2 men were seated at the table, one who had to be every bit as old as Nana Helene, and another man, who looked to be around 30 or so. The younger man looked positively livid about something, and he couldn't see the small woman from earlier anywhere. And Mikkel set him down into one of the chairs. "Sorry about the lighting. Electricity's out with the blizzard. Allow me to introduce you. This is my brother, Regis. The girl from earlier was his wife, Alma. And this is my grandfather, Nana Helene's husband, Nicholas," Mikkel said before taking a seat beside him. "Thank you for helping me," he said, bowing his head to them. The old man gave him a small smile. The younger man, however, was eyeing him angrily. The younger woman walked back into the room, then carrying a larger platter of food. She sat it down on the table, and once she did, Regis grabbed her by the wrist and yanked her hard down into the chair beside him. Daniel started to protest, but bit his tongue. They ate in silence, and Regis never taken his eyes off him until they were done. "So, Daniel, was it? I hear you nearly hit some kind of animal, and that's what sent you down the bank." How could he have known that? He told the two in the bedroom what happened, but neither had been alone with the man to say anything since. Then he realised that these walls were pretty thin. He'd probably simply overheard. Regis sat back in his seat, and the small frail girl immediately got up and ran to fetch him a drink from a decanter in the corner of the room. "That's right. Did you see what kind of animal it was?" He asked this question as if far too interested in his answer, as if somehow something had hinged on whatever he had to say. "Not really. It was too dark. It was too big to be a deer, though. If I didn't know better, I'd say a bear." Everyone at the table exchanged a glance, and finally Regis sighed, downed his drink, and stood, pulling the girl to her feet. "Alma and I are going home for the night. We'll see what we can do to get our guest out of here in the morning," he said, then walking to the door. "You'll have to forgive my grandson," the old man said. His voice was deep still, but raspy with age. "He's an entitled little son of a bitch," and Daniel startled a bit by the old man's words, but laughed a little when he smiled. "If he can drive home, why couldn't one of you drive me into town?" he asked, and there was still something that didn't feel right about this whole thing. "He isn't driving home, he's walking. It's only about a 5-minute walk to his house, and that's in this weather. The whole family lives pretty close together. This is my grandparents' house. My house is a little ways away, as is my brothers, aunts, uncles, and cousins." He froze with a look on his face as if he had said too much. "We're a close-knit family," he said, setting him down on the side of the bed. "Still, having no privacy like that must not be easy." He smiled and then laughed a little. "Trust me, it's not." Daniel laid down, and it wasn't long before he fell asleep. A creak in the floorboards was what had woken him, or perhaps it was the raised voices. "I don't care. I'll be in charge soon. You're well past the age to turn the power over to me. It's my birthright. The minute my father died, it should have been turned over to me, not back to you. As the patriarch of this family, I decide who rules our pack, not you. You're a weak old man of mind and body. The minute we found him, we should have killed him. It was the right thing to do. Now the whole pack is in danger if we let him go, and he had any inkling of what we are. The children, Arista's unborn pups, because he thought a human could be trusted. My father and mother and so many others lost their lives, and we had to uproot the whole family. I will not make that mistake, grandfather. It isn't your decision to make. He saw nothing. He knows nothing. In the morning, you and your cousins will dig out his car and get it back up the hill. You will push it far up the road and then cover the tracks so no one can see where it went down. You will take him to the hospital and it will be done with. And it was quiet for a while after that, and then Daniel heard Regis's ominous voice. We'll see. He had to get out of there. These people were insane, and at least a few of them wanted him dead. He found his shoes in the corner and slipped them on before making his way to the window. He opened it as quietly as he could, his shoulder and collarbone protesting the whole time. Finally, he managed to get it open just enough to climb outside. Oh, it was freezing, and with the wind whipping the snow around him, he was nearly blind. He looked for a vehicle, something maybe he could steal to get him back to town, but he didn't see one. He didn't even know where town was. He figured all he could do was pick a direction and head in it, but he had to be careful. Apparently, this psycho family was quite large, and they could be anywhere. He picked a direction and started walking. About an hour passed without seeing anyone. There were several dilapidated-looking shacks and trailers, but as he passed all of their windows, they were dark. He reached a clearing, and the blizzard had let up considerably as he walked, and now it was merely flurrying. He looked up and the moon was bright, peeking from the opening in the clouds, shining brightly on the snow in front of him. And then he froze in its tracks. At the top of a hill was something. It was standing on its hind legs, and it was covered in brown fur from head to toe. There was a little snow resting on its coat, but not much. As he looked at it, he could tell it was female, and he thought it might have been pregnant. Its face or muzzle was looking up at the moon. It seemed to be bathing in the moonlight, cradling its swollen stomach. It was in that moment he knew he must have officially lost his mind. He took a step back and somehow managed to find one spot on the ground without snow, and his foot landed on a frozen twig that snapped audibly in the suddenly silent night. The figure on the hill turned in his direction, lips parting into a growl. Another one of those things came forward from the other side of the hill on all fours, teeth bared, looking for the sound. It spotted him and froze, and then it stood and walked on its hind legs over to the female. It nuzzled her neck with its muzzle before walking slowly towards him. He was too frightened to move. As it walked, it seemed to twitch a little. It drew in on itself about halfway to him, and then exploded. Or that's what it seemed. He shielded his eyes as part of it went flying. Bathing in the moonlight of the last days of pregnancy ensures strong pups. He looked up. Mikkel was standing in front of him, stark naked. Man, Daniel, I wish you hadn't seen that. At that moment, the figure on the hill let out an ear-piercing howl. Noises erupted around him, and banging of doors followed by multiple howls. He took a step back, but he knew he was quickly being surrounded. He looked around, and there were dozens of these creatures, some bigger and some smaller, some with red fur and some with brown, black and grey. He turned as two came closer from his left. These two were older, wrinkly grey hair missing in some spots. And somehow, though he didn't know how he knew that those two were Helene and Nicholas. I'm sorry, Daniel. We fully intended to let you go. You'd have gone on with your life and just completely forgotten about this experience. The time for talking is over. He turned to the right, and these words had been human, but the growl was that of a wolf. He turned to see Regis approaching. He was naked, but human. A small, scrawny, gangly wolf thing at his side on all fours. Enough, Regis. Every man deserves to know why he is going to die. Mikkel took a slow step forward. Our family has lost so much due to your kind. I get it. Throughout the centuries, your kind has lost a great much because of our kind. But it's different now. Most of my family just wants to live in peace. We survive off animals. We live, love, and breed, he said, turning to the thing on the hill still clutching his stomach. Those are my pups in there. I have to protect them just like any father. I won't, Daniel started to say, taking a step back. We can't take that chance. I know what you're thinking. Even if you did say anything, people would just think you're crazy. And for the most part, that's true. But even in this day and age, hunters still exist. And there are those that will believe you, Daniel Greene. 15 years ago, a man discovered my father's secret when he struck him with his car. In his pain, my father reverted back to his form. The man was kind and still helped him, but knowing of the existence of our kind was too much for him and drove him to drink. One drunken night, 3 years later, he spilled his secret at a bar, and a hunter overheard. He got the man to show him to our home, and he slaughtered a great many of our family. My mother, my father, Regis's first wife, and even our children. We cannot risk that ever again." Danny then turned to run, but it was useless. He was completely surrounded. He turned left, and the two older wolves looked like the weakest of the bunch. He took a deep breath and ran full out in their direction, hoping to sidestep when one lunged. The world went black when Nana Helene hit him upside the head with a deceptively powerful hit. His body felt heavy, and he was exhausted, though he had a feeling that he'd been asleep for quite a while. He groaned and rolled over to his side and reached blindly for his bedside table and his cell phone. He opened his eyes in confusion when his hand hit an empty space. He wasn't in his bedroom. He shot up in bed and looked around when he recognized the room that he was in. He'd had a nightmare about werewolves of all things. He must still be asleep. And there were two people standing on the other side of the small room by the window. They'd obviously been looking out, but they were staring at him now. He recognized the man, and the woman standing beside him was pregnant, very pregnant. An image of the female werewolf from his dream, the one standing on the shaft of moonlight, entered his mind, and he knew this woman as her. Neither of them said anything as they stared at him. Mikhail with what could be only described as pity, the woman with wariness. He lifted his right hand from the bed and then took a deep breath before smacking the living hell out of himself. He cried out in surprised pain, surprised because he expected it to not hurt. You weren't supposed to get hurt in dreams or nightmares. He turned when the door opened and Helene poked her head in, a concerned look on her old wrinkled face. He didn't realize he was screaming till Mikhail shook him and the sound cut off. "It's okay, Daniel. You have my word you will not be harmed. Just breathe," Mikhail said and turned to Helene. "Will you take Arista to your room to lie down for a while? I believe Mr. Greene and I need to have a talk." He watched as the woman reluctantly made her way out of the room, and she was eyeing him suspiciously the whole time. It was interesting to note that a werewolf seemed wary of him, and he had to be losing his mind. "You're not real. You can't be real. Werewolves aren't real," he blurted after a minute of Mikhail just sitting there staring at him, and then sighed. "Well, that slap felt pretty real, didn't it?" He couldn't argue. His cheek still stung. "My family's been afflicted with this curse for generations, going back nearly 1,000 years. How the curse started isn't remembered in our stories. Daniel, as a rule, werewolves don't hurt humans. There are accidents, hikers, campers in the wrong place at the wrong time. And sometimes the young make mistakes, and sometimes we get seen by those people, and the alpha has to make a choice. Our secret has been kept, Daniel. We've lost too many of our own to werewolf hunters." He stood, then to retrieve the glass of water that Helene brought into the room. Daniel noticed he was limping. He hadn't noticed it earlier. "Why are you telling me all of this? Why didn't you kill me last night? You said you were going to kill me. I remember," Daniel said, just staring at the water the man had offered. He sighed and sat it on the table to the right of the bed. "Tell me, Daniel," he said, ignoring his question. "Do you have any family?" "No. There's no one, I swear. I haven't had anyone close for years. There's no one I even really talk to, except for the guys at work. I won't tell anyone, if you let me go, I swear." "Letting you go? That isn't within my power, but letting you live is. It's not that you're a prisoner. You can come and go, even eventually go back to work. It's just best you stay around the camp for a while, until you get used to things." "What things?" Suddenly Daniel had a feeling. It would have been better had he not woken up at all today. "How do you feel?" he asked, ignoring him again, and he froze. Yesterday his shoulder had hurt like hell, and he'd been fairly certain he'd broken something in his collar. Today, though, he was feeling stiff and sore, but those pains, they were gone. "How long was I out?" he asked, ignoring Mikhail's question for a change. 2 days. "But my shoulder and my collar," he said and looked down. He realised he wasn't wearing a shirt, and on his shoulder he could just make out what looked like a bite mark. It looked months old and definitely hadn't been there 2 days ago. By tomorrow, that won't even be there. You'll heal way quicker now. You won't get sick. You're way stronger than you ever were before. What did you do to me? He spoke low, knowing he didn't want to know the answer. Mikhail, in his defense, looked ashamed. We just wanted you dead. No outsider can know our secret, but it wasn't right. You'd done nothing wrong, and it wasn't right to kill you for something you might do in the future, and so I challenged him. He is the oldest. When Grandfather died, the mantle of Alpha would have passed to him, but with Grandfather's permission, I challenged him for the right, and I won. He took a chunk out of my leg and snapped my femur in half, but I won. I made him submit. Grandfather immediately stepped down, and I am Alpha now, and I chose. What did you do? Daniel yelled. You're not at risk to exposing our secret anymore, Daniel, because it's your secret as well now. My first act as Alpha was to turn you into a werewolf. Wow. Absolutely awesome, exclusive story there from the wonderful mind of Brandy Gray. Please, as ever, do let us know what you thought down below in the comments. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And of course, as ever, don't forget to hashtag Team Fear. I don't know about you guys, but I certainly enjoyed that a lot, and look forward to lots more from Brandy Gray. More from me tomorrow with the return of the July Werewolf series. And I hope you've all had a cracking start to the week. But above all, guys, remember, be safe, not sorry.